Well, once again, Aristo's video is not there, which means I won't use mine if he doesn't have one unless it comes on, and I just put out the candle. You'll see the smoke if I leave this image up. But good morning, everyone. It's 7:44 my time, and I guess 6 or 7 hours difference where Aristo is. So for him, it's the afternoon. For me, it's the morning. All of a sudden now, we didn't have all the noise, but I'm hearing noise from his end. But I'm going to let him talk, and that'll probably take care of most of the noise anyway. Go ahead, Aristo.
Well, good morning, Ron. As far as your time zone is concerned, it's 2:45 here right now, and I hear feedback from your end. I disconnected my camera and put it back in, and the connection somehow got weird. But doesn't matter. What matters is what's being said. You don't really have to see my face and my expressions. You know, that would be nice, but you know, it is what it is. Let's get started. I was looking at your emails, your Facebook page again today, and once again, belated happy birthday. I said happy birthday 3 days before, so now it's 3 days after, so I say it again.
Thank you.
Today is also the day of a partial solar eclipse that will be visible in your part of the world, probably around 20 minutes to 3, I guess it starts, or something like that, or is
in the afternoon, huh?
In the afternoon, yeah. There's a partial solar eclipse. You'll just see up to 40% of the sun eclipsed, I guess, maybe less. And so it's one of the major turning points of the year. There's some biblical person, I don't know, wrote a book called The Blood Moon. And this is like a modern term because the blood moon is just some October moon thing. But there's a fourfold lunar eclipse event. Every 6 months, there's total. Excuse me. There's a total lunar eclipse every 6 months during these periods. There were about 64 of these since 164 AD, since the time of the Roman Empire. However, only 8 of these fall on Jewish holidays. This has some kind of biblical ramification because 2 lunar eclipses fall exactly on the Passover date, and 2 lunar eclipses fall on the Feast of the Tabernacle, which I don't know what the Feast of the Tabernacle really is, what the significance is, but I guess that was the last October eclipse. So we have another one in April. We're halfway through this. And in some of these events, there are also solar eclipses. Now, why am I going there? Why am I not going into your little escapade with Swisindo or with what's going on with the Fed and the family and where the money's going to come from? Because I want to bypass the surface level of events and dramas and go into a more symbolic level of understanding. Why will we do that? Well, because we can become more responsible when we reference the symbolic level of understanding. It doesn't become a personal drama. It becomes a little more abstract, and it can allow the ego to take a little bit of a breather. So it doesn't feel defensive, or we don't feel who's right, who's wrong, who's whatever. Basically, it's a matter of looking at the patterns. It's not a matter of literal cultish superstition. The point is that there were 8 of these 64 eclipses over the last 2,000 years, these quadrads that fell on Jewish holidays. The last one was in the 60s. Before that, it was in 1949, 1950. And before that, it went back to 700 AD and stuff, 800
Well,
AD.
I just looked up Feast of Tabernacles, and it involves the restoration of mankind, or the restoration process. I just Googled it, so just point of interest.
Yeah, and so then the Passover involves the redemption of the people of Israel from Egypt, or something like that. It involves a sacrifice but the sacrifice is diverted from the Jews. Something about the angel of death killing the firstborn, or something like that.
Right.
The firstborn have always been sacrificed in ancient times in order for some major event to come through. So in this case, the Passover again with the Christian religion involves a sacrifice and a resurrection, basically a redemption that comes at a price. However, the Christian religion has modified it somewhat, saying that, well, it's not really a price, although traditionally that's what they say. It's the fact that there can be no resurrection without death, or without an apparent death, or without an apparent transformation that changes things so radically, we lose track of the continuity of it, so we say a death has occurred. So that's why I'm saying apparent death. We keep using the word death rebirth, when in reality, what we have is an apparent discontinuity, a blind spot in the continuity of our experience, and that brings us to a state of panic and defensiveness usually. Right now, whenever there's a bump in the road, right, there's a discontinuity between where the tires of a vehicle, of a car, touch the road, the asphalt, and the road itself. So there's a bump and poof, the tires lift up a little bit and then they fall back down. So, you know, there's a kind of jumping effect. So that's a discontinuity in the journey. We are experiencing thus bumps in the road. Now, what am I doing? Basically, I'm pointing out to metaphors and saying that the human mind often associates metaphors with literal states that it's experiencing. Literal states in our collective experience and our inner experience. So archetypal synchronicities or coincidences of events like lunar eclipses, which may have some kind of bioeffective result, which may affect biology, they may affect the course of events, they may do whatever. But, you know, that would be a realm of speculation as far as matrix science is concerned. So let's just say that there's a synchronistic correlation between the symbolic impact of these events. People always considered eclipses to be major harbingers of change, and usually disaster. But that's because people never like change. They always like continuity. Then because every time change happened, because in the historic period change involves a disruption from a controlling faction, of an authoritarian. The historic period is full of psychopathic manipulation and social engineering, way from ancient times. And these are all recorded. So you have revolutions that are engineered, you have starvation situations that are engineered from wars, and these lead to the plagues that come after because of depressed immune systems in correlation with the weather and all of this. But however, the natural world also reflects the human psyche, the collective human psyche. Probably this is why people are constantly focused on earth changes. They're saying, what's really going on is a disruption in human society. However, people are constantly also focused, many people, on the earth being disrupted by proxy. Or because the earth is being stressed by toxins and all of this, humanity is being disrupted. They don't usually see it as a singular system because it's hard to do. It's hard to do because it's hard to affirm the unity or the interconnection between humanity and the planet. We keep talking about it, but we don't have an experience of it. Thus, it is also, obviously, because it's also very difficult to experience the interconnection between each other. Even usually we experience, however, we experience it all the time through negative events, but we don't recognize it. When somebody comes at us and confronts us, there is always a reflection within ourselves of a hidden conflict. So the person that's coming at us is either as our enemy or as somebody who's upset with us or whatever, or confronts us and challenges us. It always has some internal reflection in ourselves. And it's something we don't see because, of course, we don't. We don't want to be in that conflict state within us. It's a lot more painful because it's intimate. When it's inside and you feel as conflicted as you do when somebody comes at you from the outside, the dissonance is incredibly disorienting, painful, and you can't get away from it. You can always turn off the internet when somebody bitches at you from the other side. You can always leave and say, forget it, go somewhere peaceful. But when it happens on the inside, where are you going to go? You can go to Egypt where denial is, that's about all you can do. And
that's what most people do.
Exactly. If we've become so much masters of denial, of course we're not going to experience the interconnection between us. It's a reflex. And what I've been researching is something called NeuroLinguistic Programming, covert hypnosis, all of these things that have become popularized but have been around for a while. Back in the 50s, there was a psychologist named Milton Erickson, and this guy basically mastered the art of hypnotizing people without actually putting them under hypnotic induction. He would just talk to people and give them subliminal suggestions while he was telling a story, engaging their emotions and everything, and they would do whatever he said. And they banned the guy from the Psychological Association because he wanted to teach it to others, but it has tremendous therapeutic purposes. It bypasses the denial mechanism. For example, it helps people accept themselves, and as long as it's used frugally and masterfully and compassionately. So it is a tool. However, this kind of thing has, and the reason they didn't want to teach it to everybody is because, of course, everybody learns it. Madison Avenue has learned all of these methods. The politicians have learned all of these methods. You can be sure that everybody who is anybody in the media and in authority has been trained in these kinds of methodologies. Anybody who's a spokesman can actually come to an audience, talk to them, and convince them to pull the wallets out of their pockets and just throw money at them. You know, this has been proven. And the thing is, see, the person who is convinced does not know they're convinced. They think it's their idea. So, however, you say, well, you can't hypnotize somebody to do something they don't want to. No, but with covert hypnosis, under controlled conditions and over time, you can do so. For example, the military specializes in convincing people to be killers. You know, it's human instinct not to go and shoot people in cold blood, you know, but that's what people do in the military. It's a job. I got to do my job, you know. So you're a mass murderer, so that's your job. Okay, I mean, this is our society here, but of course it's framed differently. We protect our country. We take orders. We wear uniforms. All of this and that. It's a big elaborate control mechanism that is one massive hypnotic induction. That is what brainwashing is. But the difference between the fine line between hypnosis and brainwashing is very, very little. There are layers and layers of guardians in our mind that are there hardwired to prevent us from being snowed and convinced by dangerous people and dangerous motives. However, all of these, you know, one psychologist likens them to bouncers at a nightclub. So overt hypnosis can put the bouncer to sleep and you sneak in the nightclub, you know. But covert hypnosis just tells the bouncer, oh, look over there, there's a cop, you know, and, you know, the bouncer looks away and you sneak behind her back. And this can happen, but at as you move to the nightclub, there are other rooms on the inside where the VIPs go, where there's more bouncers. Deeper and deeper into the subconscious, there are more and more guards. And psychologists have done there has been much research into how to bypass all these guards. All the way down. Much of magic, occultism, spirituality is not spiritual. It's mental. It's all about mental control. Religion, about mental control.
Well, that's what religion is. It's mind control.
Exactly. So all of this mind control is actually now being popularized because probably, you know, well, the people who have taught this stuff have made a lot of money teaching it to elites and everything, aside from traditions and all of that. But at the same time, it's like, let the people know, because then the little people try to control each other and play with it, and they don't really have the discipline for the most part, you know, and they're desperate because of all the terror stuff out there, and they're already brainwashed. So all you have is a resultant chaos of people controlling each other. Guys trying to pick up women using all of these, you know, super guidelines of say the magic words and women will fall at your feet. Say the magic words and you can sell anything, you know, constant. I've just been zooming over the internet, looking at all of the wide, you know, smorgasbord of marketed manipulation. Learn how to manipulate everybody just like the psychopaths manipulate you. Now, again, this is a tool and it is not evil. However, how many people are going to use it for therapy? And you say, well, is that why you're looking at these things, to just, you know, see what's going on? No. I was looking at it to see how many people out there are actually teaching people to defend themselves against this kind of manipulation. Answer, nobody. not formally. There's certain articles that some alternative sites say, just be aware that it's happening and you can defend yourself or whatever, you know. So really it's almost like somebody selling offense and aggressive weapons, but nobody giving any options for defense. Now, the only people that would do that is somebody who is encouraged or funded by a system whose aim, whether it's a bad spiritual thing or a conspiracy or whatever, or just a confluence of events, you know, basically whose desire is chaos. So this is an atmosphere of chaos. Chaos freaks us out. It pushes our buttons. It's not a bad thing. However, a spiritual person it's not a bad thing because life is generated out of chaos. You know, all creativity has a chaotic element. The human orgasm, one of the most pleasurable physical experiences ever for human beings, is a chaotic event. It's not a nice and ordered plan type, you know, whatever. A storm is chaotic. A storm is creative. So we're talking about taking natural chaos, a situation where the earth and the collective human psyche say, we've had enough, we do not want to go about this meaningless life anymore. So let's change. Well, the psychopaths are part of the same system, and the psychopaths represent our own shadow that we don't want to face, obviously, and they might also represent a cosmic shadow, a grander shadow that some religionists try to pose in terms of a mythological, archonic, I don't know what, you know, or a psychologist might pose in terms of the wetigo that we talked about, some kind of representation. The fact is, you cannot isolate it to just individual human behavior. There's something more going on. And all of this basically that we don't represent, the shadow participating wants to take the chaos and turn it into a destructive dynamic, a life-denying dynamic. No matter what their excuses, the psychopaths are death worshippers.
What worshippers?
Death.
Death. I thought you said debt, which is almost
almost the same thing. That's what debt is, because somebody who wants to kill you, when they own you, that's what they're going to do. Now, the thing is that a lot of this, there are overt psychopaths, which are the bad cops, bad psychopaths, and there are good psychopaths. Good psychopaths are closet psychopaths. Now, I'm not pointing fingers here. I'm just saying that some psychopaths will be your best friend until the last minute. And the last minute is when the bad psychopaths are eliminated. Because the bad psychopaths are ones that are obvious. Now, years ago, there were no bad psychopaths in terms of politics. Most people thought politicians may be corrupt, but they're not actually out to kill us in a grand conspiracy, you know, in cahoots with nobility and bankers and I don't know what the hell, Illuminati and all of this. People would laugh at that stuff, you know, 20 years ago and stuff. But these days,
they're not
laughing. No, the bad psychopaths are out there, and eventually they do show themselves. It's always a pattern. You see in the movies, you know, the serial killer is eventually, that's who it is. Maybe toward the end of the movie, and if the serial killer isn't discovered, they'll reveal themselves. You know, they can't stay hidden. They don't want to. They want you to know who it is. And so they may not want to get caught, but they'll want to be recognized. It's me, I'm doing this, you know. So the bad psychopath, the overtly bad psychopath will come out. But remember, just like we're denying our shadows, the shadow doesn't go directly to the bad psychopath. It goes through a link of individual predispositions. For example, the one who's the saint is the one who's probably in denial the most. And so they have no overt psychopathic qualities. The saint that says, let's, you know, creation, let's leave creation, let's whatever, let's be detached, that's not participating in their own sense of shadowness, you know, but is a saint. You know, if I were to name names of saints and say these people are the vilest people on the planet because they're the ones who did the original denials that have pushed the shadow all the way to the other side of the coin, you would say, oh, how dare you? You know, how dare you say these things about psychopaths like that? Now, I will not say somebody like Jesus was that, because Jesus actually went on the cross and confronted his shadow and tried to work through it in a way, but he confronted it in one event. And look what happened, you know. The whole thing and because Jesus wanted to perform a ritual, a representation, in my opinion, that had collective impact. So it was something, you know, that occurred on a special day that had ramifications during a time period when all the Roman Empire was focused on this geographic area because they were the only ones that were in revolution against the empire. You know, all of these events made it a collectively impacting dynamic. So, in my honest opinion. So, the death and rebirth was a contraction into one individual of something that could have been gradually extended. So the whole thing is, Jesus did say, love thy neighbor and all of this, but I don't believe he gave much advice in terms of accept your shadow. He did say, do not cast the first stone. He did say, forgive and all of these things, but what do you do about your evil impulses? You know, don't do them. Repent. You know, just stop doing it. And it's like, well, that's not much, you know, from somebody who's supposed to be the wisest man on the planet, you know, at that time or something, or the Son of God. Tell us how to deal with evil, you know, in ourselves. You're casting out demons. You're basically pushing them away. How do you transform it? You know, that question was not answered at the time. It could not be answered because, you know, the best that anybody could do was a discontinuity event. It's within this discontinuity that the transformation actually occurs. And that discontinuity is a blind spot to the conscious mind, to the conscious being. There is a Orthodox tradition that says that when Jesus was taken down from the cross for 3 days before he got resurrected, his spirit went to Hades, went to the underworld.
Yes.
And so in the underworld, he basically talked to all the spirits of the dead people that were pagans and converted them. So actually, the pagans who were converted, it's kind of an explanation the church gave, I guess. But there, I believe there's some truth to that. The underworld is the subconscious in psychological terms. It's also, there may be an astral or some kind of metaphysical component to this. You know, I'm trying to balance the tightrope between metaphysics and kind of rational thinking here. So I'm not going to jump into one and I'm not going to jump into the other if I can. But I'm trying to convey a certain mindset, an archetypal perspective of the events that are going on. The fact is we're afraid to transform. We keep talking about it, but we're scared shitless of it. Now, that's a good thing in a sense because where people say, well, where do I transform? How do I transform? Well, if you're afraid to transform, that means the closer you are to your fear, that's the greatest opportunity for transformation, isn't it? Your fear is actually your indicator of where transformation is more probable. And the psychopaths may be terrorizing us, rationally speaking, to freak us out and make us, excuse me, and make us impotent and paralyzed. However, the shadow within them that wants to come and be integrated with us may have a different motive. It may be saying, look, you know, you're afraid of transforming. That's the truth. So you shift your perspective, like I said in the previous video. Shift your viewpoint. The shadow is telling you that you're afraid to really, really transform because where you transform, that's where you're most afraid. Fear is the indicator of discontinuity. Something comes to disrupt your life. What happens? You get scared. You panic, you know. So the Passover and the Feast of the Tabernacles have to do with confronting challenge and moving toward redemption. As you said, the Tabernacles was the redemption of mankind or something like that. And
restoration.
Restoration. So you have, after redemption, you have restoration, a rebuilding. So, but you cannot rebuild if you don't tear down. So, but a lot of people today are trying to rebuild without first deconstructing what limits us. We are not confronting what inhibits us. We are not confronting what truly disempowers us from the inside. You can engage into some group, whatever group you're in, you know, and I'm not going to name names even though we all know them. And there's many more names, many more groups. You can engage in a group, and you engage in a group because you want support. But that's good. Now,
and you generally don't get the support you think you're going to get.
No, but
at least that's my experience.
No, and you ask why. Well, one explanation, one viewpoint might say, look, what if you go into a group to alleviate your fear? You're afraid of of being alone, you're afraid of being disempowered, so you go to a group for solidarity because that alleviates your fear. And so you have a bunch of scared people joining a group to make each other less scared. That sounds a little counterintuitive, doesn't it? You know, you have a really scared person, another scared person, and so they meet together, and they hug, and they're trembling together. Now, aren't they going to be twice as scared? You know, somehow they believe they're going to comfort each other, and each person is going to make the other person less scared. Each person is asking the other person for help that they cannot provide for themselves. For example, somebody goes, I am suffering. Please pray for me. You know, we've all said that. Well, but everybody else is suffering just as much as I am. You know, so they can't pray for themselves. How are they going to pray for me? Well, if one person basically prays a little bit for me, and then another person a little bit for me, and then another person, then maybe it'll accumulate. Yeah, but they're asked to pray for like a bunch of people. I mean, you look at the internet, you know, half the people are asking for prayers. You know, so it's somehow there's this idea that, well, we can't help ourselves, but we can easily help somebody else. I can't feed it. I don't have any food for myself, but somehow I can magically manifest it to give to somebody else. Life force, belief, courage, all of this is like nourishment. And so all of this is counterintuitive. If you really sit back and think about it, it doesn't really make sense. But people who are engaged in things often talk about spirituality, and they say, well, we're not in denial. We're not, you know, this. We're very spiritual. We're idealistic. And yes, on one level, yes. But there's all kinds of motivations underneath that are natural human motivations that are designed to protect us from hostile environments, you know, from an evolutionary standpoint, from a standpoint that the Illuminati themselves recognize, the standpoint that covert hypnosis manipulates. It says the following: we are hardwired to certain reactions. These reactions in a normalized environment, in a natural environment, are good for us. However, human beings have the ingenuity to twist all of these reactions and to cause them to lead us to our own destruction. What I observe is if these so-called powers that be on any level wanted to destroy us, they claim they have the power to do so. However, what they also recognize in their own way is that we are a single system. If they try to destroy us as the cause of destruction overtly, where they're recognized, they're going to be destroyed. It's called karma. But if they manipulate our own sense of free will and decision into making us destroy ourselves, then they don't get the karma. We do. It's our fault. You know, it comes down to that. We make the choices that even no matter what, we can't claim ignorance because we know better on some level. Because the truth is we are in denial of our own fear. We don't like to feel fear. Fear is an emotion we don't like to feel the discomfort because there's no solution to it. Cognitive dissonance is something bad. It is. It feels bad. However, it's not physical pain. That's the difference. Physical, we treat it as if it were physical pain. Physical pain, if you keep it up, it can actually cause inflammation in the body and disruption in the nervous system. You can actually die from prolonged physical pain. The same thing occurs with cognitive dissonance if you don't address it. Cognitive dissonance, when it goes into the subconscious, when you're denying it and trying to smother it with psychological painkillers, it will also kill you in some way. It will lead you to your demise, and it's doing that to humanity. The psychopaths are offering us a combination of psychological stimulants to heighten our pain, and then psychological painkillers to drugs, basically. Psychological drugs, ideas, thoughts, reality, presentations, things like that. Zen Gardner had an article that Peter Egler, posted on your Facebook page about Project Blue Balls. Basically, yeah, it's basically the false hope syndrome. That whether it's covert or whether it's overt or whether it's planned or whether it's spontaneous, the effect is that it's a false hope is a tease, and a psychopath always wants to raise your hope and dash you to the ground. So one thing you can notice is that
it's done a good job.
It's done a good job because, well, it was preceded with a lot of doom thinking. People freaked out about constant thinking. When things are actually safe, psychopaths are going to make you afraid. If they're trying to terrorize you, it means that there's nothing going on, for the most part. Of course, this may not be an absolute statement, but usually there's not. If they're trying to make it seem like nothing's going on and hope is just around the corner, they're planning something, you know. So when you're just ready to relax and yawn and take that, you know, finally everything's okay, the axe is going to fall. And that's the way they push your buttons, because that disrupts your whole mechanism, because once that happens, you're in a complete state of chaos, and then the program gets in. And so they're one step closer to making you a true slave. A true slave doesn't know they're a slave. You know, a true slave believes they're free. That means no free will. I mean, Roman slaves had free will. They had the free will to know that they were slaves and wish that they could just kill their masters. But a true slave would say, well, that's who I am. I'm not even a slave. It's just my part in the world, you know. And that's what they want us to become. They can't manage. Oh, yes, you wanted to say something? Oh.
It reminded me of Hinduism and the caste system, where people
exactly.
just accept, well, this is my lot in life, and there's nothing I can do about it.
Exactly. And it's not only my lot in life, but I should be happy that I'm part of the grand design, so to speak, where the king can actually, emperor, whoever's on the top, is actually the benevolent, you know, they're causing everything. You know? They're the ones that are basically who I should worship, because I'm the footstool, you know, and I should be happy to be a footstool, happy to be the loyal servant to the king, always happy to be a loyal servant.
Yeah, this is my role this time around.
Exactly.
Next time, maybe I'll get to be the king.
Well, in some cases they do say that. In other cases they say, no, it's, you know, that's it, you know. It's always been that way, it'll always be that way, because the king is hereditary. Their family and everything. And back in the day, you know, it was like, well, if you're hereditary, that means both your soul is hereditary, like the pharaoh. The pharaoh would basically be a soul that would be mummified in order for the soul to constantly be there and protect Egypt. And then they would incarnate into the next pharaoh. The Dalai Lama, a perpetual soul, changing bodies back and forth. You know, the same thing with the emperors. One emperor, eternal, they just shift bodies back and forth. You know, so they may have come up with the whole reincarnation thing of, you know, well, you can be a king too, when they saw people didn't buy the pharaoh theory. I don't know. The point is that our buttons are being pushed. Whenever you find yourself in a situation that says it doesn't make sense, your buttons are being pushed. So you better look to your control panel instead of wondering what the hell other people are doing. That's the first thing. So if you're in a situation and you have a conflict with another group that has their own reasons, because the group basically, once a group exhibits paranoia, as opposed to rational caution, you know, caution is one thing, but paranoia and finger pointing is a whole other thing. And panic is a whole other thing. I mean, anybody knows when they're in a panic. They just have to look within and see how they feel, you know. But most people just try to rationalize it and say, well, I have a reason for being in a panic, as if they're on trial. Nobody's judging anybody for being afraid, even though spiritual people have now gotten into that stupid habit of doing so.
Yeah, and it is a stupid habit.
It is. Instead, saying, well, I'm glad you're freaking afraid, because that shows you're human. It shows you're not a psychopath. Psychopaths are very, very good. They're afraid too, but as we said, but they're very good at hiding it. So they want to make us all good at hiding it, like wanting to hide it and wanting to deny it. So it's like, look, man, we're afraid that we're vulnerable, but really vulnerability is a strength. That's the Chinese idea. The water is one of the strongest elements. It flows, it's yielding, you know, it bends. The tree that bends with the wind doesn't break, etc., etc. Some martial arts have that. You throw a punch, you have to be yielding to receive it. You know, you have to feel vulnerable. Vulnerable does not mean you are weak and you will break. It means you know how to roll with the punches. They do not want us, and they may be a far broader spectrum than we think, you know. The tangible they of those who want to control us may be a far broader spectrum. They may be so-called benevolent. They may be the good psychopaths, as I said, who basically do not seem like psychopaths, but they may have rationalized, well-meaning, seemingly, even to themselves, However, the bottom line is once they get rid of the bad guys, they will be the next bad guys. That's what history has told us. You know, a conqueror comes and saves everybody and does away with the evil guy, and then they become the next evil guy by degrees or the next day. So we need to watch out for that. The question is, why would anybody, really, if they were that powerful, why would they care what we think? I mean, I can understand them spilling stories so we don't organize, but really it's more like factions are coming out and saying, you have to believe in us. You have to believe in this. You have to believe in that. Well, why can't people just step back and say, well, you know, why can't I generate belief? There's an idea that says there's nothing that has its own inherent meaning. We give the meaning to whatever it is. Now, I kind of don't believe that idea is phrased properly, because if I can give meaning to anything, then that means the meaning comes from somewhere. That means that meaning exists in me, and it can't be generated in a vacuum. I don't put meaning together out of building blocks. I am that meaning. My essence is that meaning. And if I'm interconnected with everything else, then I don't monopolize that meaning. I don't hand out meaning. So everything is inherently meaningful. If everything is interconnected and I am meaningful, then everything is meaningful. So, but if you want to create a philosophy of separation, you say that's meaningful and nothing else is. But everything is interconnected. You know? My
meaning is the only right meaning.
Well, it's the only meaning. Everything else is meaningless, you know. It's basically, so I am the nourisher. It's really funny that somebody who claims to be the nourisher is usually the big parasite, you know, is usually the one that feeds off of everybody. Pay attention to me, I'm your savior. Well, it's that attention that feeds them. It's give me your money so I can save you. Give me your allegiance so I can save you. You know, it's like, well, you know, why do you need our allegiance to save, so you can save us? Because I have the power to save you. Then you don't need our allegiance. You know, the whole thing is that unless you say, well, together we can do it. Well, yeah, well, why, how, if you say together, that means everybody's equal or there's an equivalence. You don't form these hierarchical zones of absolute, I am the one with the power, but I need your allegiance. You know, that's what the good psychopath will actually say. The bad psychopath will actually say, I'm going to kill you, you know, and you better run and hide, but you can't. You're going to get it. You're powerless, and that's it. So you're going to obey me and be my food, whether you like it or not, and maybe I'll spare some of you, just to sprinkle a little hope. You know, that's where the shadow becomes uncontrollable. It becomes obvious. Anybody can spot the so-called black hat. Anybody can spot the bad guy. We've been trained to spot the archetypal bad guy all our lives. You know, we haven't been trained to spot the bad guy who is actually a good guy. We haven't been
the wolf in sheep's clothing.
Exactly, but we haven't even been trained to spot the sheep who's rabid and has fangs. You know, the saint that basically thinks they're a saint and acts like a saint and helps so many people, and yet their internal denials and refusal to address, because they're the most qualified to address evil. Who would be qualified but the saint? And yet they're the ones who are pushing evil away from them, down the line, all the way to the fucking other side of insanity, the extreme shadow. Most of us are in the middle. So paradoxically, you know, it may seem the saint is the most powerful, but really it's us in the middle who are most powerful, because we get access to both sides of the coin. We have both the so-called saintly side, whose weakness is denial, because we can't say saints are really where we want to be, because the saints have a weakness, and it's denial. And the psychopathic side, the evil side, whose weakness is also denial of a different sort, because they don't see the big picture. They don't care. They have a death wish. They don't see that death wish. They want to destroy, 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 thinking that somehow they'll come out on top in the end, when in the end they're going to be destroyed too. Just like the cancer that eats, eats, and eats, and finally I have the body and I've eaten it and I'm full, but they can't live without the body. You know, they've eaten themselves out of house and home, they've killed the goose with a golden egg, and now they starve, they die. And so, and they don't care. Because if you look at the art, even Alex Jones points this out, the art that psychopaths constantly buy and what they focus on and all of this, and it's not that they do it for us, to freak us out. In their private lives, they do it the same way. It's all about death, suffering, destruction, nihilism, oblivion. Somehow they think if you can't beat it, join it, and maybe you'll be its servant, and so you can come out on top. Yet in reality, it's within them. The funny thing is, it's within us too.
Within everything.
It's within everything, exactly. This death wish, because that's what it is. If you look at your conflicts of how people act, haven't you noticed people often cut their noses off to spite their faces? Well-meaning people just sit there. 1 minute they're all ideals, and yes, let's move forward. And the next minute they're cutting their noses off and their arms and their legs out of some stupid freak out, you know, that doesn't even make sense in hindsight. At the time, it's, you know, but in hindsight, it looked, why did I ever do that? This is what happens life after life in a reincarnating soul. They go, why did I ever do that? And then they're back in the same position. They do the same thing. You know, what does Einstein say? If you do the same thing over and over again, you know, the same problem.
A different result, that's the definition of insanity.
Exactly, exactly. So we come back to Jesus on the cross. The condition of Jesus being on the cross is a condition of insanity, because it is the condition. It's not insanity itself. Insanity is our response to that condition because of all the imprints, the programming, the traumas, everything. So we are in this chaotic state and we keep acting the same way. And so the same results keep happening. Our challenge is to look within and see, how am I going to act different this time? I know my buttons are being pushed, you know. It doesn't take an egoless person to realize their buttons are being pushed. And it's not a good thing or a bad thing. My buttons are part of my biology. They're part of my spirit too. You know, we have spiritual buttons. We're not immune to this. As long as we have desires, feelings, and a heart, there are buttons. A heart's button is basically, well, I want to be loved and to love. But I don't want to be hated, and I don't want to experience hatred. And then that can be manipulated, so you do end up in hatred. You do end up in trauma and fragmentation. Heartlessness. So, and it's very, very difficult to do so. I mean, my point is, okay, you get yourself in a drama. Yeah, okay. What is it, like 40 minutes or something?
40 plus.
Okay, 40 plus. We'll be winding down. As you can see, it's a very, very involved topic.
Yes, it is.
It's an involved topic, and my point is, again, look within before you look without, but use the signals that you get without to help you look within. And there's one thing, true spirituality, because in the early days of prehistoric times when we were hardwired, physicality was the boss, instinct, physical instinct. So might makes right in the animal kingdom very often. Humanity became more adaptable. They developed mind. Those who developed mind were able to skirt physicality. They were able to skirt the dictates of instincts. The big brawny guy wasn't the threat anymore to the little guy who was smart and could manipulate them. And thus we've learned to master the mind just like our ancestors mastered the body. They could be in the cold, they could do all kinds of things. You know, their immune systems were better, all of this, but we focused on the mind. Now we've mastered the intuitive aspects of the mind in ancient times, and more modern times, the rational aspects of the mind. And we are bringing them together in this crazy crisis time where the worst of the worst have learned to master the mind against us. So what do? Well, we do the same thing our ancestors did with physically intimidating psychopaths. We go a step beyond the mind. This is where spirituality comes in. You can't fucking overcome the psychopaths using mental methods. You can defend yourself to a certain point, you can play the game, you can navigate, you can whatever the mind control. And some people can do that, and it's necessary, just like you can't ignore your physicality. You need to increase your health, your immune system, all of these things. However, if you really want to overcome them, you got to go to a level where they cannot access. Let them think they're superior. Let them think they're on top of the pyramid. Let them think they're spiritual. You have to find true spirituality beyond the box. That is our challenge today. And the way you find it is to take the path of Jesus and actually face your cross where there's discontinuity in your life, where there's dissonance in your life, where there's fear and chaos in your life, but face it on your terms as best you can. And that means as an internal state where you have the power of choice, not as some authority coming to fucking torture you. So that is my suggestion for this time. Let us discover true spirituality beyond religion, beyond what anybody else said. And let us take any resource at our disposal and our own prayers toward that end, because it's there. And this is the evolutionary leap that's not going to leave the mind and the body and the emotions and anything else behind. It's going to take them and put them in the new context. I'm sorry I took so long this time. And thank you once again for your patience.
Thank you, Aristo. Well, once again, Aristo's video is not there, which means I won't use mine.